Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent Training. Welcome to our live question and answer class. On Saturdays, I host a live class so that you can ask your questions about pronunciation, fluent speaking in English, whatever will help you improve your overall American accent and English pronunciation. So feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time, or if you're watching as a replay, you can use the comment section for your questions. At the start today, I want to talk a little bit about fluent speaking, and we're going to look at a phrase, how we link and reduce, and how to sound natural when saying the phrase, "What are you up to on Saturday?" So, of course, in everyday speech, natural language, we link things together, we reduce sounds in order to be able to speak fluently. It's correct and it's clear. It sounds natural. So what we don't want is to be speaking word by word. It sounds very unnatural and choppy if I were to say, "What are you up to on Saturday?" You can hear how that doesn't really sound like a native speaker. It's slower, it's choppier. So let's break down how native speakers would say this phrase. First of all, in what are, we link, and we, instead of using a true T here, we use a flap T. It sounds more like a D, or basically the sound is voiced and it's very light. We also reduce the R to more of just an sound. So what are becomes water. I'll write that for you respelled with the letter A says the sound, vowel schwa, and then we link it all together, water, water. Then we also can link to the U, what are you up to, you up. As we link between the U, the rounded U of the U, and the of the up, we need a little W sound to connect those. What are you up to? Sometimes we might reduce the U to more of a ya. What are you up to? What are you up to? In which case it can sound sort of like, what are you up to? But what I would suggest, it's clearer and it's also natural and fluent to do you up, which sounds like you up. So as I move from the rounded U to the unrounded what are you up to? That W sound just naturally happens. I don't need to overdo it or overemphasize you up. Just notice that if I don't have that connecting sound, we're going to lose the two syllables of you and up, and it'll sound more like you up. So that is something that you can go for in casual speech. What are you up to? What are you up to? If you want to be clear and correct, then go a little bit with the two-syllable version, which is you up. What are you up? What are you up to? Typically, the word to in connected speech gets reduced to a ta, but in this case, the phrase up to is more important. So if I'm saying I'm going to the store, I'm going to work, then to gets reduced to more of a ta sound. In this phrase, up to, what are you up to? The to doesn't get reduced because it's a phrasal verb. So being up to something, we get a little more emphasis on the to than we normally would. So it keeps its clear vowel. What are you up to? So I'll write it this way. This type of to, like I'm going to, doesn't get reduced to a ta, keeps its clear oo sound. What are you up to on Saturday? On Saturday doesn't get reduced, but these are two words that sometimes we have mispronunciations on. So be aware that in the word on, we don't want any rounding here. It's not on or on, but rather the vowel. So thinking about what are you up to on. And again, because we're linking from that rounded oo to the unrounded we may hear a little w sound happen there as well. What are you up to on? So I don't need to overdo it. I don't need to on. But if I'm moving smoothly between the two, what are you up to on? You're going to hear that vowel to vowel linking happening there. And then in Saturday, this is a word that has two flap sounds in it. So both my T and my D are flapped here, Saturday, where I don't want Saturday and I don't want Saturday, not a strong stopped D or T, but rather that light flap. It sounds like one roll of a rolled R. So for some people, it's helpful for them to think about that as an sound, or as a rolled R sound. I'll rewrite it as Saturday. I use the two D's here because when we have D's in the middle, we flap them, D's and D's in the middle. And you can think about the word sadder. I'm sadder than I was before. Same sounds as in Saturday. So putting it all together, what are you up to on Saturday? What are you up to on Saturday? Also notice that this to is a true T, up to, because we're keeping the true oo sound, and we're going from a consonant to a vowel here. The other thing that to can do is if I'm saying something like going to, it ends up more like going to, where we flap that T as well when there's an NG sound or a vowel sound before it. When the to is in the middle, we lose both the T and the oo sound, becomes more like a da, going to do, etc. So you can get more help for how we reduce and link the word to in several videos I have for that. Also, just in general, our linking playlist, our Real Talk playlist and our linking sounds playlist is going to walk you through natural linking and reductions, how we do that in conversation, in short phrases, and how to practice that. And I cover that in detail as well in my online course, Real Talk, which looks at the spoken word versus written words and helps you implement these reductions, this fluent speaking in your everyday speech by teaching you about it, the patterns, and then also looking at phrases, looking at conversation, and how to use TV and movies to implement that Real Talk technique to have that fluent speech. So check that out on our website, speechmodification.com. That's our Real Talk advanced course. You'll find it helpful if you like this kind of breakdown for understanding what happens in connected speech. Okay, so you can ask questions about this topic, about pronunciation, about other topics as well, whatever you'll find most helpful. I'll turn to your questions now. If you're just joining us, type your questions in the chat at any time, or if you're watching this later on as a replay, I do go through the comments after class and connect you with resources on the channel and on my website to answer your questions as well. Okay, nice to see so many of you here. Welcome everybody on this Thanksgiving weekend. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving if you celebrate. And thank you for your patience with last week's class was canceled because we had a big windstorm here in the Pacific Northwest and we lost power and internet for several days. Now we're back, so thank you for your patience, and go ahead and I'll turn to your questions. Okay, we have a question about the phrase, what are you doing? So similar to what we were just looking at with the what are is going to get reduced. And this is one of the phrases I cover in my videos because of course it's something we say all the time. So in what are you doing? The stress is on the do of doing, so that word won't get reduced. Everything before the stressed word can be linked and reduced. So rather than what are you doing, one way to build and practice on this is to use backwards chaining. So first we'll write out the linking and then we'll show you the technique for practicing. So I'm going to link what and are. It's going to sound like water. And then I may reduce the u, so I can either use you, the oo sound, or ya. And then my stress is on my do-ing. And in doing, we're going from the rounded oo to the unrounded I, doing. So again, we have that vowel to vowel linking there. And watch for this one in what are you doing? Doing, we're going to have a rise and a fall intonation. So let's build it from the back. Doing, you doing, what are you doing? What are you doing? Very nice. Thank you for that request. Thank you so much for your gift, and I'm glad that you're finding the points helpful. Do feel free to ask questions if you like, and thank you for that. Super. Okay, great. Let's also talk about, we have a question about the word adversity. because you're seeing a couple of different things in the dictionary. And that's pretty normal, that if I'm just saying a word by itself, if I asked any native speaker to say this, they might use the the clear vowel here. It's stressed on the ver syllable. So this first syllable can be reduced, and sometimes we reduce it and we don't use that clear vowel. So sometimes we might see it as adversity, sounding like ad but not clear, not adversity but adversity. So stressing on ver, and then our flap here, city. But oftentimes in the unstressed syllables, especially in the first syllable, we're going to reduce that vowel. So we can use anywhere from our a sound all the way to a schwa, or even an I or an S sound. The key is in these kinds of words that I don't want any clear vowel. I don't want adversity or adversity or idversity or even really adversity. No clarity there. If you hear me say it naturally, facing adversity, I would say I'm probably closest to a schwa, or a little bit higher, raised up from an a sound and not clear. The adversity of the situation. So the key there is that it's not so important which vowel we're using. I just don't want it to be long or clear. Adversity. So it's almost like not really making much of a vowel. I talk about this for words with re, like return, where I can use an I sound or even maybe a little bit of a schwa sound. Turn, return, return. I'm somewhere in this region. This is referring to the vowel quadrangle, that we have the I, a, and sounds. So check out my videos for clear and reduced vowels. That's going to really help you with the adversity of that problem of how to interpret what the dictionary shows you, whether it shows you a clear vowel or if it shows you as a schwa. The idea is that in those unstressed syllables, often we don't have a true clear vowel there. Thank you for that question. That's a really important topic, and you can check out more information on that here on the channel. If you want to know which specific videos, one thing I suggest is when you're on our homepage, you can see the menu across the top. It says community, videos, etc. Go all the way to the right and you'll see a search box with a little search key. And then you can type in that search box. I would type in reduced vowel, and then all of my videos that have that topic will come up. You can also leave questions or comments on this video or any of my videos, and I'll do that search for you and show you which videos are relevant to your question. But it's a great way to find what you're looking for and use the tools here on the channel to help you. Okay, wonderful to see so many of you. I'm going to keep turning to your questions. Thank you for your patience as I go through them. Good morning, everyone. We have a question about how to pronounce story. So in story, we have the letters OR do say the OR sound. So I would build from OR. When you're saying OR, try to think of that as being the driving force for OR. So keep your sound, say or. You're just sliding a little bit from a rounded to unrounded for or. And then we have the letter Y saying the E sound. Then you can add your ST blend. So or, ori, tori, story. Notice when I do tori, I use a true T, but when I do story, excuse me, it's an unaspirated T there, so not a lot of air. Not story, but story. The story of her life. Yeah, thank you for that request. Okay. Excuse me. Nice to see you guys connecting, having a conversation here in the chat. Thank you so much. All right, feel free to continue to ask questions. We have a question now about the word because. So people say this word differently. There's two correct ways. Well, there's a few correct ways. So If I'm just saying it by itself, I might use a little bit of a clear E here, like because or cause. So we have the word cause with the ah vowel. But often in the word because, we actually say it with a schwa. So thinking about it more like cuz, and then a little I sound here, because. That's because that first syllable is unstressed, so it has a reduced vowel. You can almost even think about it as a schwa, like because. It's not wrong to say because, but I think that it's more typical in American English to use this schwa, the cuz sound, because. So a couple of different correct ways, but thinking about that first syllable being reduced and the second syllable having a schwa rather than being like the ah, like in the word cause. Good question, thank you. I do have a video about that, and I'm only teaching the way, but it is in the dictionary and it is correct to use ah as well, and some people, maybe East Coast, will use that ah sound. Okay. All right, great question, thank you. We have a question about the certain letters are used with the eh sound, as in set. So can you use that with the nd? So words that start with e, like end, or maybe also words like tend, can you use the sound? So actually, I tend to use that this symbol for this sound, like in set. This symbol, some dictionaries will use it, but it's actually tense, the A sound. So yes, you can use the same sound that in the word set and the word end. They both have the same sound. They will sound slightly different because of the N. So if I'm saying set, or for example, get the end, or get the men, this presence of the letter N, the N sound, is going to raise up your eh a little bit. So your ear might hear it sound different between get and end, or set and men, but it is the same vowel. It's just slightly influenced by the nasality of the N. So yes, you can use the same vowel here. And when we say end, we may have a tendency to use a little bit of a glottal stop at the beginning of it, because words starting with vowels, we don't always connect them. Now if I'm saying, for example, the end, instead of using a glottal stop, I'm going to use a little bit of a gliding y sound, the end. That's that vowel to vowel linking that I've been talking about recently, where we link together and the extra kind of semi-vowel or gliding sound happens between those two vowels. Okay, I hope that answered your question. Thank you for that question. All right, we have a question about the word immediately and unfortunately. So in immediately, this one is just pretty helpful to break it down syllable by syllable. So think of it as I, and then our stress is on the me syllable. It has a clear E, tense E sound. Me, and then we have another tense E, D. As we're going from the E to the, from the D to the E, D, more of an I sound there. It's not going to be in the dictionary, but you're going to hear a little y connecting those two. Immediate. And then we tend to not let this T out. We're going to use an unreleased T there. D, Lee. That's because the T is followed by a consonant sound, immediately. You can say immediately, but you can hear how it sounds, doesn't sound like the American accent. So typically what you want to do is go up to that T, stop the air, and then release right into the L, immediately. So good way to practice longer words like this, one syllable at a time, go slowly, like immediately. but keep the longer syllable longer, relatively. Or start on the stress syllable, immediately, immediately. That's going to help you get the rhythm and the relative lengths of those syllables. Great word, thank you. And then you also asked about unfortunately. Same idea here, that we have second syllable stress. So in unfortunately, we have the schwa, syllable stress. This tu is a ch sound, like a ch sound. Fortunately, we have a schwa again, an I or a schwa there. And then same idea, stopped unreleased T into the li. So sounds like unreleased T, li, unfortunately. So going slowly, unfortunately, or starting on the stress syllable, fortunately, unfortunately. Sometimes we might give a little extra emphasis on un if we're saying no, unfortunately rather than fortunately, but typically the un can be fairly short and the for is stressed. Good words, thank you. Both of them, those techniques of breaking down the syllables, going from the stress syllable, and just working from a slower pace to a faster pace can help you use those fluently. Don't forget also to use them in some short phrases, because oftentimes we master a word by itself and then we go to use it and it still comes out with our old patterns, or we still stumble on the word. So the more you can practice putting it into a phrase or sentence and using it with that new pronunciation, the more likely you'll be able to use it correctly when you're trying to do that in conversation. Thank you for that request. Okay, we'll take a few more and then we'll need to wrap up for today, but hopefully I'll be able to have time to get to all of your questions. If not, if I don't get to your question, please leave it in a comment and I will come back to you and share some resources, or I'll add your word to my list to cover in a future class. Okay, we have a question about a song that says, can't take my eyes off of you. So for pronouncing the off of you, we tend to link off of. So these two words often people will mispronounce because of how they're spelled. They're a little bit confusing. So in off, we have the ah vowel and the letters F say the f sound, off. So thinking about that like off. And then the of is actually a schwa and a v sound. So no O and no F. So off of. And then for you, we have the y sound and the u sound. So when we're saying can't take my eyes off of you, the stress is going to be on eyes, and off of you is all going to be linked together. If I'm just saying off of, then I'm going to stress on the off. So in this context, off is a little bit longer, and then of is going to be very reduced. We link these together, so you can think of it almost as off of you. Off of you. Off of you. Can't take my eyes off of you. Let's take the pressure off of you. It's off of you for now. Off of you. Hopefully that's visually clear. I think these two words are tricky for people oftentimes. I'll hear people use this pronunciation off for the word of, and vice versa. Both of them can tend to have more of a rounded or O sound. That's the error that I hear. The correct way is off of. Thank you. That's a great phrase to look at. Okay. We have a question about the word us, like they gave us, and as, whether they're pronounced the same. So they gave us some time. They gave their name as. So us has the schwa and the s sound. So it sounds like us. So here letter S says the s, but in as, letter S says the z sound, and we have the a sound. So if I'm saying gave as, again, like in adversity, or that our earlier conversation about reduced vowels, I may not always say as. This sometimes sounds a little bit more like is or as, or even us. Think of it as so where the z sound is the most prominent and the vowel is less important. So it can have a little bit of that sound, but we do need the z. So if I'm saying as a friend, that's gonna have a clear a because the as is more stressed. So it'll sound like as versus gave us some. I'm gonna really hear that s sound versus the z sound of as. So slightly different, but some similarities can have some similarities in the vowel because as can get reduced. Great question. Thank you. Okay, wonderful to see so many of you here today. Thank you for the smart questions. They're so helpful for not just you, but other viewers. I really enjoy these live classes because the questions that you ask help me decide what topics to cover in videos and in courses, and you're the best experts in terms of what's challenging and what's hard to understand for English, both for just straight pronunciation and in connected speech. So thanks so much for being a part of class today, everyone. Okay, we have a question about the words lonely and loneliest. So loneliest. So first syllable stress on both of these. Letter O says the O sound. Thinking of it as low, or same as the word lone, for example. So for lonely, long and short. For loneliest, we have the ist sound, and as we move from the E to the I, we have that little y connection. So the loneliest person. She's very lonely. Good words. Thank you for that request. Okay, we have a question about all words ending in try, like, does it sound like tree? So like momentary, documentary, commentary. So no. So actually all of those that you mentioned have more, they don't sound like tree in American English. So if I'm saying commentary, it doesn't sound like tree, but rather airy. So the AR says air here. So we have commentary, momentary. In documentary, that is one that sounds a little more like tree. So documentary. We will sometimes say that, documentary, with just tree at the end, or documentary. So it can sound a little bit like ture-y, documentary. But oftentimes some things that have ture-y can get just reduced down to tree. So I watched a documentary on it, or I watched a documentary. But a lot of words with ARY have the airy. So momentary, commentary. So generally you might have to look in the dictionary to see what letters AR say, if they say air there, or if they get reduced to just uri or re. But very good question. A little bit confusing because the same spelling, but different pattern, different stress and pronunciation at the ends of those words. Okay, wonderful. We have time for just a couple more quick questions, and then we'll need to wrap up for today. If I don't get to your question, I apologize, but do leave it in a comment, and I'll come back to you with more information. Excuse me. Okay, we have a question about the ture and sure, and I'm actually going to make a video on that topic because it's a very good question. So we're looking at words like future. If there's a vowel before the TU, so words like future or nature, we can only use a ch sound. If I said future, it wouldn't sound correct. But words that have a stop consonant, like a K sound, a T sound, a P sound, like picture. I can say this as pick, unreleased T, and ture. That's how it'll show in the dictionary, but you'll also hear people say it more like picture, picture. The difference between the ch and the sh here is not really noticeable, whereas in future is very noticeable. So the pattern is if there's a vowel before the TU, or also if there's a S sound like in pasture, or an L sound like in culture, or an R sound like in archer, then you definitely need the ch. If there's a stop sound or an N sound like in, I have notes here because I was going to talk about this today, like in venture, I can say venture or venture. It doesn't really matter as much. Picture or picture doesn't matter as much. So I will be making a longer video breaking down this ture, sure ending. But if you want to be safe, you can always use ture. That's always going to be correct. But you'll notice that in things like picture or picture, it doesn't, picture example, that SHCH is not as distinct of a difference, and so it doesn't matter. But if there's a vowel or one of these sounds before the ch, then you definitely need the ch sound. So hopefully that's clearer when you hear me saying it. And again, as I mentioned, I do think that's a very excellent question and topic. So I'm going to make a longer video walking you through lots of example words and highlighting the ch and sh differential there, or the lack of differential. Okay, great. We have a question about the word plummet. Yes, and you're right. It does sound a little bit like it at the end. But be careful that you don't want it to sound like an O at the end, not plummet or plummet, but rather clearly sound here. So we have first syllable stress, a stressed schwa, and then a reduced vowel here where you might see it in the dictionary as an I or as an but it's barely any vowel there. So think about same as the word plum, and then just a little it sound, plummet, plummet. Sales plummeted after the bad news about the company. Good, okay. And let's look at the word consequence. So the consequence, even though we have sequence within this word, we're stressing on the con here. So we have our clear vowel there, con, and then this is going to be more of an I or an sound. And this is going to be, rather than quence having clear it might be a little bit of an I sound. It's okay to say it as an but it's unstressed, so you don't want it not too long. So consequence, sa or si, I or there in those unstressed syllables. Okay, I'll try to rush through and get to the rest of your questions, and then I need to wrap up for today. We won't have live class next Saturday. I have some stuff going on. We'll regroup in 2 weeks from today. So save up your questions, leave them in comments, or plan on attending live in 2 weeks, and I'll get to your questions. Look forward to seeing you again then. We have a question about sure, pour, and ture. So there's a couple of different ways that people will say these. For sure, I use the vowel here. Some people will use more of an sure, I'm sure, or I'm sure. Both of those are okay. For pour, that one is the or vowel. It's the same as this. But some people will use as in sure. There was a poor turnout. That tends to be a little bit more East Coast. West Coast and Midwest tends to use more the or sound here, pour. Same as that kind of pour or that kind of pour. And then for ture, this is the one where I definitely use the sound. You can almost think about it like ture. Again, we have that vowel to vowel linking, where this is that tense really rounded, and I move from the rounded to the unrounded and I have that w glide connecting the two, ture. Yeah, so sometimes like a New York accent is going to use tor here, but I highly recommend using for tour. For pour or sure, you can go to the or the or you can stick with pour and sure. Then they have that same vowel to vowel linking. I do have some videos covering these words and giving you some of the different breakdowns for how you hear it. If you're having trouble deciding which pronunciation to go with, I would listen for what you hear around you, and if you're in a region where one of them is stronger than the other, you want to go for what's in your area, because that will help people understand you. If you're hearing a mix, then you can go for whatever's easiest for you to pronounce. Great question. So a follow-up question on future, it's a vowel sound. So when there is a vowel sound, that's when you need to use a ch sound. So future, it is a vowel sound before the ch. And I can't use future. So maybe I misspoke, but when there's vowels or R or L or S, that's when you need to for sure use a ch in that word. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for being a part of class today, for your support of the channel. Thanks for the super. It's so nice to see that kind of support coming in. People subscribing, joining as channel members, all of that helps the channel to grow. Liking and commenting, watching the videos, it brings more people, which makes me happy, because the more comments I get or the more questions I get from you, as I mentioned earlier, that really helps me decide what's most useful, what videos to make, and what's going to be helpful for you when you're on the journey of improving your English pronunciation, natural speech, and fluent speech in English. Thanks so much for a wonderful class, and it's nice to see so many of you here today. Do check out the free resources and our inexpensive online courses on our website, speechmodification.com, and feel free to leave comments and questions. I'll help direct you to resources here on the channel and also on our website. Thanks, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you again in our next live class in 2 weeks. We will have some video releases again, of course, in the upcoming weeks, so I'll be back before live class as well. Thanks, everyone. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. speechmodification.com. Bye, everyone. Hope to see you again soon.